Thanks very much indeed, and a very warm welcome to you all. So let me try and explain what I think are three dimensions of what's fundamentally changing. When we look at Industry 4.0, we're looking at, first and foremost, the way that people are going to consume products going forward. So if you think about how people have traditionally bought cars, they would have gone to a dealer, spent some money, and basically bought the car. But increasingly what we're seeing, for example, in cities, is that actually owning cars doesn't make a lot of sense because it's very expensive, parking's very difficult. So increasingly we're moving to a situation where you're paying by use. So the question is that what we're doing now is we're not owning assets, it's all about how we use assets. And therefore the patterns of consumption are beginning to change. As those patterns of consumption change, therefore what's happening is the business models to deliver that are beginning to change as well. So as we think about the digital business models of the future, we're increasingly thinking about how data is driving those business models. So if I keep going with the car analogy, if you move to a situation where, for example, car companies no longer have to sell cars because basically people are paying for them by the half-hour or the one-hour slot, what does that mean for your business model? So what we begin to see now is companies like Tesla no longer need dealers because what they're able to do is download software upgrades to their car over the internet. And so what you're seeing is disintermediation or changes to the structure of the way the industry is operating. But increasingly, the way that you manufacture your product is changing. So that not only do you have to be really good at engineering skills, but you also have to have the software skills as well. So what we see is changes in the patterns of consumption, changes to business models because they're being very much data-driven. But as they're data-driven, then what you're also beginning to find is that the partnerships that you need in your industry value chains are also changing because now you need to work with people who can help you provide the services for the car. So if you think about the future, essentially the car moves from just being a vehicle, from moving from A to B, to becoming a data platform. So as you drive your car, the first thing that you will know is that the car is able to self-diagnose itself. So if you have a problem with the car, it's able to alert you as to what that problem is. So there's an element of diagnostic in there. The second thing the car can then do is it's able to know where it is, not just because it's linked into sat navigation, but it's also able to identify increasingly the cars around it, not just the car in front, the car behind, and increasingly the 20 or 30 cars that may be on the motorway with you. And as you begin to drive towards the city, there's linkage between the car and the infrastructure in the city, and even beginning to link in the car to the traffic light systems and the congestion systems so that we can begin to imagine in the future that actually what you're able to do is manage traffic systems based on real-time information about how congestion is building up in cities. So what you're seeing is the car is not only a self-diagnostic item, it's an instrument, if you like, that's linked into other systems around the city. And of course, the car essentially becomes an entertainment platform. Because what you're going to be able to do is put the car into self-drive mode. As you put it into self-drive mode, then you're able to do other things. You can shop online, you're able to, because the car is wireless and connected, you're able to use it because the children in the back, for example, want to watch a film. So the car becomes a data platform. The moment you say that, then the types of partners that you need to be working with become very different. So you take an example like a car, and what we're seeing is the patterns of consumption are changing, the business models are changing, and the types of partnerships. And so when we talk about Industry 4.0, essentially what we're talking about is how smart products are going to be developed in the future, how data is becoming the center of our business models, and then what are the smart services that you need around those products in order to really make sure that the customer experience is the, if you like, at the heart of what you're delivering. And I think the essence about Industry 4.0, if I was to say one thing, is that we're moving to a world of real-time information. And what's fundamentally different about Industry 4.0 is that most businesses in the past have traditionally made decisions on the basis of historic information. The moment you can move to real-time information so that you know where your customers are, you know what's going on in your car, you know what's happening to your assets, then you're into a very different world. And that is part of what I think the digital revolution is all about. So let's use that for a tee-up.
Thank you, and do come and join me, please, in the comfy seat. So thank you very much indeed, Mark. So that's what we're talking about. We'll see if our other panelists want to add to that definition, challenge any elements of it, but a brave new world in which pretty much everything has changed. How you make your money, how you know what your customers want, and who you work with. Let's bring up the rest of the panel. Dana Eleftheriadou, who is Policy Coordinator for Digital Transformation in what is known in Brussels as DG GROW. This is the Directorate General for the Internal Market, Industry, Enterprise, and small and medium-sized companies. Very warm welcome, nice to see you. Make yourself comfortable. Norbert Copenhagen, Vice President for Research and Innovation at the multinational software company SAP from Germany. Welcome to you as well, Norbert. Vincent Fosti, who leads the Technology, Media and Communications practice and is digital leader at Deloitte Belgium, one of the largest professional services networks in the world, and has very significant initiatives in this area. I know we're going to hear more about that a little bit later. And yes, and Rasus Shakaitis, who is Manager IT Advisory for KPMG in the Baltics, another of the big four professional services providers, also has big initiatives in this area. Very nice. I didn't get a chance to meet them earlier because I've been on stage since 9 o'clock, so we meet here. So a very warm welcome to you all. Listening to what you've just heard, Dana, is there anything you would add to Mark's description of this new world of Industry 4.0? How big is the potential of this? The Commission has, you just talk, they monitor the mics. How great do you think the potential is for digital technologies to revolutionize the way industry works? He's painting a picture of a very different world. How do you see it?
I fully agree with what was said by Paul, and very nicely depicted as well. So the potential is huge. Industry 4.0 is there and will totally transform every value chain of the traditional manufacturing, but also services business. So what Paul described very well was this transition from the product-based manufacturing to the blending of products and services. And car, of course, was an excellent example, but there are many examples like this. So European manufacturers should be ready very soon to respond to this trend and to offer propositions that will not be based only on their perception of how products will be look in the future, but how very high-value services will bundle with these products as well. There is a tremendous change to be done there. The other trend that we see is that digital becomes intrinsic part of every value chain. So as you very rightly said again, Paul, the car stops to be a car, but it's a data platform. Data platforms will be part of every single value chain. Take, for example, the healthcare, health monitoring and health management solutions will pop up immediately. And again, businesses, industry, services need to be ready to respond to these changes. Whether Europe does enough to do this, well, in my view, yes, it does. There are movements in this sector. However, if you take the statistical figures in mind, we are lagging behind. We are seriously lagging behind. So according to IDC data from last year, only 4 in 10, so 40% of, only 40, so many as 40% of companies in the European Union do not use any of the really advanced digital technologies, so big data solutions, mobility, cloud, social media. They do not use any of those. Only 1.7% of companies at the European level in 2014 were using all of these advanced technologies. So we have a huge road in front of us.
Okay, well, I'd like to talk about how we get more companies to go down that road, what they need to do, what can be done to help them in a little while. But Norbert, from your point of view, how big a revolution is this? Is this as big as the 19th century industrial revolution? Is it bigger? And are we doing enough to realize the potential?
I think it's the ultimative. It's a ultimative revolution. Absolutely. I mean, what we're talking about is things. We know things in detail, so we know how things are being ordered, how they are serviced. We know where they are going. So talking about this chair, about this table, so we're not just talking about product groups or article numbers or material numbers. We know exactly how they originate from, how they has been composed, and how this has been delivered, and what is the reaction. And finally, sometimes we talk very technically about this whole thing. I think, personally, we talk about Internet of Things, actually. And of course, it's a very predominant term in the context of Industry 4.0, so things getting connected, getting smarter. We also talk about appliances, bringing the physical world and the digital world pretty close together, so cyber-physical system as a term. But me personally, I like the term Internet of People or humans, right? So we need to try to bring also the human inspiration and be empathic for the people interaction with the internet and the services we are providing. Just yesterday I was guided by a very nice lady through the, from Vilnius through the old town, with the lovely old town here, and we had a coffee break, and she said to me, you know what, I love to being online, I love to use my people networks and stuff, but I'm still a human. I want to live, I want to go out, I want to chat, of course, online, network with my friends, but also want to go out, have some personal activation and get a feeling, grasp certain things, and have a certain reaction, and have a dialogue with people. And I think that's very important that we use the plenty of opportunities. So IT is basically providing more and more capabilities to express yourself, to expand yourself, not only when we produce products or innovate, but be creative, right? Being creative. And this is something leading me to your second part of the question. So everything what we can do to foster creativity, entrepreneurship, and so forth. What I mean by that concretely is teach. For instance, I'm doing some teaching at universities as well. So the frontal talks and stuff like that. So you do, for instance, in front of 500 people, students, you do frontal lectures and stuff like that. So moving that, for instance, is also my personal goal, to moving that into more interactive, more into design thinking kind of things, where really, let's say, the creativity of people, of ourselves, are getting together and effective and create things and try something out. And this leads me to the last point from my side, at least for the first round, which will be the winners or the losers, I believe. We should be brave to try out things, and it has been said very often, I guess, to fail also. Failure, culture of failure. And when you ask me what is the comparison between, for instance, North American, let's say IT companies or innovators in general and to European, I think we should be brave and proud to fail because we tried something. Because when you don't try something, you cannot fail.
Okay, indeed not.
Thank you very much.
Indeed not. Thank you very much. Lots to come back to. Vincent, from your perspective, I mean, we're seriously lagging behind, is Dana's take on this. We need the courage. You work a lot, and I know both of you work a lot with clients and customers in terms of examining how they're using digitization. I think yours is called Build Your Digital DNA. You, Erasmus, have a digital innovation network. What is your experience of the degree to which companies are seizing this opportunity, or do you think we're lagging behind? And how important is it that we get this right? Thought from both of you on that, please.
Well, lagging behind would mean you would have a reference point. It was interesting in a previous conversation about comparing Europe against the US market, whether we were lagging behind. You can measure that. Number of startups, number of ideas convert into new businesses, how many actually take the risk of failing. There you have a reference point. I think the challenge here, and therefore the car example is really enlightening, everybody can relate to it. In often many of those industries, and whether it's manufacturing services, we do not have a reference point. So to your earlier questions, yes, it is big, because first of all, it will take decades before many of those services and value chains will be transformed. We don't have a reference point. Well, I can't answer the questions whether we're lagging behind. What I can answer, however, is how challenging it is, and quite frankly, that is universal. My partners in US or Asia face the same situations, is how difficult it is for organization enterprise that have a big legacy. And many of the players we're talking about, whether it's in the chemical industry, in the aerospace and defense, in the car industry, have a huge legacy. The legacy being tens of thousands of people, processes, technologies, ways of working, a DNA. You can't create a DNA, even though we might one day. It takes generations to change. And many of the conversations we have with clients is all about how do I start? How do I create a new value chain or a value network in an industry that's been operating as it is today for 20, 30, 40 years? Yeah, so the lagging behind, I would put that a very relative notion, but rather what it takes for companies to transform.
And that a crucial point, that sort of not even knowing, it's not just, we talked in the opening session about digital mindsets and entrepreneurship. You say there's so much more. There's a whole infrastructure, there's a whole ways of working. We're changing everything, and that is very radical. I was struck by what you said about, because I wanted to ask you all what the time frame for this is, and I was struck that you said it would in some cases take a long time to do it. So we'll come back on that. But Rasmus, what are we talking about? What are we going to look like? What will Industry 4.0 look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And would you agree that the challenge here is a very broad one to make sure that companies really can take this up? How do you see this revolution and how fast it will happen?
Yes, it is indeed. Now, when we're talking revolution or is it evolution, I would put two parts. Revolution, I would say, in the sense that in the future, companies, not companies, but systems will do decisions themselves. In that way, I see as a revolution. As a evolution, I see what companies or systems, partners will, in evolution way, they will become more integrated. I mean, in all supply chain, vertically, horizontally will be integrated. So that's, I think, looking into the future in 10 years. In 10 years, I think, yes, I see more like kind of evolution. So companies, yes, will start automatically integrate themselves, will be more partners, talking digitally with each other. I think after 20, 30 years, we will see what systems will appear which will do decisions themselves without even human interventions. So that's how I see the future.
Okay, and can I just ask, I mean, you said companies say, where do I start? Is your experience for both of you with your initiatives and your networks in this area, is your experience that they come to you and say, we know we need to do this, we just don't know how, or are they not even really aware, many of them, I'm talking about established companies, obviously not the startups, that there is this new world out there and that they really do need to embrace it. So is there an awareness issue before we start? A thought from you all in terms of how do we need a wake-up call, or have we got the wake-up call, now we need an action plan, as it were? What's your experience, Rasmus, in dealing with your clients?
Yes, I think companies do understand the need to be more integrated. I mean, with partners, with supply chain, with all that. Companies do understand they do need a call, but they have to be closer to customer, especially when we're talking the future of a market, that will be a market driven by customers. Therefore, I think where companies need wake-up call is really to get knowledge and to understand how to interpret data, which will be, today there is ocean of the data, tomorrow will be even, I think, space of the data. So here companies should start thinking, so how to make the data which will be available, which are available today, how to use it, and how to the data bring and to change business way of doing.
Okay.
That's, I
Thank
think, the
you. And
challenge.
Vincent, you've developed a toolkit to help companies measure how digital they are and what they need to do. But do they come to you and say, how do I use your toolkit? Or do you have to go to them and say, hey, you need to measure your digital DNA? Which way round is it working? Are you having to do a selling job to convince them of the importance? Or as Rasmus says, do you find they know they've got to do it, they just don't know how?
Yeah, I think, to keep it simple, of course, you'll see differences between sectors, different sectors, more matured, more exposed. This is all, by the way, this is all about technologies.
Yeah.
So you'll find sectors more exposed to others, to the technology revolution, first of all. But in general, there's abundance of information. Somebody now takes a browser, a tablet, types Industry 4.0 on Google, and starts reading, and we'll see you in 10 years. There's enough information. Today it's fueled by ourselves, the consultants, it's fueled by the technology providers, the academics. There's enough information on what is possible. How it gets integrated, of course, this is still on the test bench, but how does an organization, somewhat established, granted, not a startup, that has a legacy, gets engaged, has to change, try new things. It's very, very difficult for an organization. So the imperative is understood, how to go about it, how to get started. I was at a company on Monday, big established chemical company, operating globally, 50,000 people worldwide, and there was a task force, and they were actually discussing about how to explain the executive committee about how to start a digital transformation initiative. Everybody knows what the chemical industry will look like in 10 to 20 years. There's enough published about it, but that one established company is struggling just to get started.
Okay, so it's building that roadmap. Would you agree with that? I mean, your company provides software to help people manage business opportunities, customer relations, and so on. Are you finding that they are now coming to you and saying, we need this stuff? Or are you still having to go out and say, this is the future, guys, get with the program, as it were?
It's both ways, I would say, but I'm traveling a lot in the moment, so I get a lot of requests coming over to show the capabilities of our technology platform or big data platform. And companies are really starting to explore the possibilities. So what does it mean when I add RFID tags? What can I do with GPS data? Mark wonderfully put out a very nice conjunction of automotive industry in the urban context. I mean, what can I do in this combination? And also there, we very often, of course, we have the business model innovation discussion coming along. But I would also inspire or use this opportunity here to inspire in the way that you need to try out certain things and as certain, let's say, great innovations in an internet world evolved, that should be just put out there in the internet and try it out. I mean, of course, we all know the famous examples that are out there, like Uber or other ones, but how many failed in that time, of course, yes? And I would like to add also to your point, what you make, the cultural change, I think you mentioned there. This is also what we experience on our client side. We have roughly 500,000 clients on a global basis. So huge companies, small, medium enterprises, and so forth. And very often when we just recently, 2 days before, I had a conversation with a automotive client as well. So they have this engineering spirit. They're building certain very engineered parts of the automobile industry. And the software guys on the other side, the IT guys, sitting somewhere and they're making sure that the IT, that the office systems are really working nicely. And they're doing some weird things, but they're not really adding, maybe we're putting it to another company even, or do some outsourcing discussions here. And what we see also more and more, that these are brought back together. So joint teams from the IT side, so having different skills, different backgrounds from the IT side, from the user interaction side, from the service orientation, from the business modeling, but of course also from the engineering side, so bridge the gap between those professions.
So absolutely crucial. As you say, we live in a much more multidisciplinary world. We have to find ways to do it. Dana, you diagnosed the problem, seriously lagging behind, you said. Vincent saying, well, yeah, we're not sure what the benchmarks are by which we're measuring that, but what do you identify? Companies know they need to do it. They don't know where to start. What is the problem? Is it simple lack of know-how of how to get started? Is it money? You need to invest in all of this, and we've been through very tough economic times. Do you see as the biggest obstacle that needs to be addressed? And then we can talk about how companies can be helped to do this. And a thought from you on that as well, Mark, and if you think the picture is as serious as Dana is painting it.
First of all, we have to separate between large corporates and small and medium enterprises. They are not on the same basket. So even if undoubtedly the large enterprises see the challenge in front of them and they are trying to get their acts together, and they have indeed serious issues with the legacy systems, small and medium enterprises are in another category. They are, first of all, they do not know, or I would say they do not have an accurate understanding of what these technologies will mean for them, for their business, who the competitors will be in the future. And of course, they do not have the skills, and they do not have the money to invest in this, transition, in this transformation story. But even if when they they can get the money, they don't know where to start again with.
Yeah.
So which technology, for which purpose, what way to go, etc. So what we have seen is that there is a serious lack of awareness. And we have started from the European Commission side to, we funded an awareness campaign, Whatify, which sounds like Spotify, but it reads, what if I, you know, put aside my doubts, but I really start doing that? What if I find the solutions and get for that, etc. This is the inspiration of the story. So apart from this pan-European awareness campaign to really raise the doubts, to address the mindsets, but also to give concrete advice of where they can get access to finance, what are the European rules for establishing a business across the borders, how to do business across the borders, etc. We also see other things that are missing. For example, we see that there is not sufficient investment from the private sector. And this is a big priority from the new Juncker Commission. I refer to the Juncker investment plan. So there is 315 billion for investment there to be leveraged by private sector. But we see the industry and small and medium enterprises alike, they are hesitating. They are not there to take profit of this opportunity. And of course, there is the big issue of skills. I believe other people refer to that as well, and the issues of barriers. So as we are talking about phenomena like the self-driving car and health management system over digital platforms, there are huge regulatory issues that will be, need to be addressed at least.
Okay, thank you. Mark, fairly bleak picture here, I'm hearing. You described this brave new world. I'm not sure what time frame you think it's happening. It's already happening, but how dramatically and how quickly it will change. And for you, are we seriously lagging? And is it was a very interesting point earlier about, you know, we talk a lot about mindsets, but it's about changing sort of everything about the way you work as a company. And that's not an easy process for any company to go through.
No, that's right. So the way that I would start the entree into this is to think about what a business fundamentally does. It wants to grow the top line, so it wants to grow its revenue, but it also wants to reduce its costs. And I think when you look at Industry 4.0, the way that many companies, particularly the big companies, have got into this is through efficiency. In other words, what they want to actually do is improve their asset utilization. So again, let me give you a completely different example. So if you're a lift manufacturer, and you have 1,000 lifts in different sorts of buildings, if you've got sensors on those lifts, and you know that there are 16 particular points which determine the performance of the lift, if you can measure that, then what you can actually do is see how those lifts are operating and performing. And if you can then analyze the data that's coming off each of those 1,000 lifts, then you're able to actually predict when those lifts might break down. If you can do that, then you can do preventative maintenance, and then you can move from selling lifts to actually selling performance of those lifts. In other words, you're going to guarantee the uptime of those lifts. And there are many of you who will know how frustrating it is when lifts break down or stairways, sort of escalators don't work. So you're changing the model because what you're actually doing is working on the efficiency, the utilization of the assets. That, I believe, is the start for many of the big, large incumbent companies really thinking about how they improve the efficiency. And so the real challenge, I believe, is actually not the efficiency argument, but it's much more about the growth. Because the thing about what data-driven business models are really all about is not just how do you improve the efficiency, i.e. how do you improve the productivity, but it's ultimately about where do you find the new sources of growth. That is what's going to determine, I think, the successful companies. And that's the really difficult bit. So, for example, you can be a car manufacturer and you can improve the way that you design your sort of cars and the way that you sort of disintermediate dealers. But at the end of the day, can you actually sell smarter, connected cars better than the next person? Can you, if you are a Michelin, for example, can you sell tires by the 100 kilometers rather than selling tires in absolute sort of terms? What are the new business models that work? What are the growth models? Because that is the thing that really drives the change. And I think actually it's not a question of Europe versus the US. I think it's much more a question of the incumbents versus the new tech pioneers. Because the challenge for any incumbent, whether they're a US company or a European company, is how do you continue to adapt and transform, just as all the other panelists have been saying, in a world where we are becoming much more data intensive.
Okay. So in a sense, I think if I understand you rightly, what you're saying is when you drive it through the efficiency, which is clearly important in terms of increasing productivity growth, you're thinking with the old head on. You're still applying old business models. You're not changing to see the opportunities. I'd like to come back, and I'd be very interested if I can steal that for a moment. I'm going to go out to the audience and then come back and pick up on that. And also, Dana talking there about one very practical thing that's being done, that what if I like that's very clever. What you all think can be done, what needs to be done from a policy point of view in order to help companies to make this transition? Is it about the money? Is it the what if I, the knowledge, the awareness of how to do it? What is the key thing we need to do? And also to talk about, is this a moment, we're talking about entrepreneurship here as well as digitalization. Is this a moment of great opportunity for the entrepreneurs? How do they seize this opportunity to go in and help industries change themselves? But before we talk about either of those, any comments or questions from any of you? Does anybody want to join in our discussion at this point? Okay, let us come back on that point then. In terms of the ecosystem, how do we help? What needs to be done? And it can be in terms of people like you who help companies to manage these processes or provide the software and so on that they need, or people like you and the initiatives. What's most helpful from a policy point of view to create the best possible environment? Is it to provide money? Is it, and I'm thinking here, the Commission had a thing called Factories of the Future, funding demonstration models, looking at what all this will mean. Is it that sort of thing? What's most useful? Rasmus, a thought from you first. How can they help most? And have that mic back.
Well, as Industry 4 is very broad, very broad. I mean, from making factories more efficient, I mean, making more automation. So it's as well bringing companies closer to customers. So I think companies do understand, some do understand, some not. But what could make things better for them? I think all what you mentioned. I mean, we can show examples. I think funding definitely will help because I'm talking about perspective from Lithuania companies. So once we have companies funding, we know that funding is available, they will be more eager to invest to go. Because all that we are talking about, those investment, automation, integration, those solutions are very costly. Now in Lithuania, we have small, medium companies comparing to European level. So for them, it's, I mean, not so easy decision to invest in such things. They are not sure about the return.
And also, given how fast the technology is changing, they may have a concern. I invest a huge amount of money in this now, and then 2 years down the road, I find I need to do it again. So how do you cope with that? How do you help them cope with that? Vincent, for you, what is the most useful support that policy can provide or money, public money can provide?
Yeah, well, there were two things. Dana mentioned awareness, and awareness in a sense, not in the sense that you need to explain what these technologies can do, But exactly to my earlier point
Yeah.
about where has it worked, where is it starting to take shape, and making that, you know, information circulate. You know, and when companies are asking us how to get started, yeah, how will my sector be transformed, you'd have stories to tell. But the problem is they tend to be, you know, best kept secrets. The second one is to Mark's point. If you're changing established industry sectors and value chains, which now today tend to be organized, structured around industry clusters, industry associations. If you reshuffle the cards, you need to start assemble different kinds of players from various different sectors together. What policymakers can do is facilitate the emergence of these forums, whatever shape or form they take, associations, temporary groupings, clustering, something they can sponsor, they can encourage, they can physically facilitate, in order for these new industries and new value networks to emerge. And this is where the discussion will then take place, and these new value networks will take shape. It's another form of awareness building, but in a very different and more focused
Thank you.
fashion.
Dan, I'd like to get your reaction to that, but no, but just to complete the picture in terms of how they see the needs of industry in this area, how big an issue is the concern, you know, okay, I'll invest in this, these are tough times, I don't have a lot of money to do it, and then it may all move on. How am I going to keep pace with this rate of change? Do you think that holds people back when you're talking to potential customers? Are they nervous because they don't know where it's going, so they think, well, I'll wait and see, and maybe I'll do it in a year, maybe I'll do it in 2 years, but right now it's moving too fast for me to get a handle on what it is I need to do and where I should invest? Or is it other things that policymakers need to do to help?
I personally believe it's all about infrastructure, network infrastructure building in all sense. What I mean by that is I talked before already about the importance of interactive education and creative education and foster the entrepreneurship spirit in our schools and the universities and wherever we collaborate and teach. And in this regard, I think I'm a truly believer in the market, in the competition we are all in. And particularly talking about Europe, I strongly believe that politics could work stronger on the political single union, actually. And without that basis, I think we continue to fall behind what we already see when you, for instance, look at the top companies across the world in the IT sector or all type of industries where they are listed right now in terms of revenue, in terms of top line, bottom line, in terms of capitalization, stock market capitalization. It's clearly we have to work on that one, and what you see on the political side, also from the refugee situations, things like that, that we come to a common basis here, how we handle that from the political perspectives. I truly believe politics need to drive that, to come really to a political union. Otherwise, I think we have quite progressed in the economical union, I believe, based on our joint currency and other things, but for taking the next leap or to scale up more tremendously and to catch up with Asian, let's say, economies, North American economies and others growing, we need to do that, and that would be highly appreciated.
Dana, in terms of what you can do to help this sort of role as a marriage broker, well, no, I mean more than, you know, you actually need to go out and find and bring together all these different disciplines, and this brings in the question about entrepreneurship in here, and how do you introduce the startup, the budding entrepreneur with a solution to the traditional company's problem, and bring them. Do you see yourself now as not a marriage guidance counsellor, but more of an introductory agency to make these connections happen that create the hubs?
Yes, partly I would say I see the Commission's role as intermediator, but mostly as enabler of this transition. So indeed, it's up to businesses to see their opportunities. It's up to businesses to have a vision and go ahead boldly and do it. And we are there to support them. And for this to happen, I believe that we need a strong political leadership. And I believe from the European Commission side, with this new Commission, digital has been placed very bold as a high priority in the agenda, and this demonstrates leadership, but we need leadership at all levels, member states level, cities, regions, business leadership as well. And this leadership then needs to be underpinned by strong support measures, so sound investment by private sector, skills, the skills agenda is a huge one, support services, mentoring, but also regulatory issues and policy making that fits for purpose in the digital age. So all these existing regulatory frameworks do not fit necessarily in the digital age. We need to go back, scan them, see what doesn't fit and take it out of the way.
Okay, thank you very much. Mark, the role of policymakers in all of this?
Yeah, I think there are two fundamental dimensions. The first is the government actually needs to empower itself. So if you look at the whole sort of digital sort of dynamic, I think education, health and cities are critical areas where government has an awful lot sort of to do. And if we keep talking about digital skills, the whole way that we're going to go, the whole educational structure is actually going to change going forward. I think government can take a lead on that. You look at the whole movement towards patient-centric care, get away towards sort of more people sort of being treated at home rather than in hospitals. Again, governments in many countries have got a key role to play in there. And we could talk about cities. So I think that actually government needs to get on the front foot where it's actually directing policy. And obviously policy is partly at the European level, but it's also at member state level. So I think there's a whole issue there. The other issue which nobody's mentioned yet, but I think is absolutely critical, is platforms. Because when you actually look at the way, particularly in business-to-business markets, actually what you find is that companies have different platforms of data, because basically what are platforms, but essentially it's the way that you sort of accumulate data. And I think the big issue going forward is the interoperability between the different platforms and how those are actually going to work in practice. And the thing that we need to remember is the regulatory cycles, particularly in Europe, are 5 years plus. 5 years plus don't work with a very fast technology moving landscape. And so what I think we're going to need is much more public-private dialogues about how do you really make these platforms particularly interoperable, how are they going to work together, how are we going to share data across those platforms, what are some of the principles that underpin that. And so I see a spectrum from principles through policy and through regulation. I think we've only just begun to open that, and I think platforms will be the door opener into that discussion.
Thank you very much. And that importance of the if I can have the mic, of the interoperability issue was not mentioned in this session, as you say, but very much underlined in the opening session by the European Commission Vice President. He put that as one of his standardization, interoperability, absolutely at the heart of this. Come back in a moment, and I'd like to come back to the opportunities that all of this is opening up for the bright budding entrepreneurs that we have with us in this building today, the startups. We talked in the last session about how to really help startups scale up, etc. We talked about it in the opening session. Where's the big opportunities here? We're talking a lot about challenges, but are there also opportunities? But before I do that, a last chance in this session for anybody, if anyone wants to join in. Oh, I see one there. Could you possibly, hang on, if you can meet me halfway, stretch across the divide, building bridges here. Thank you, sir. Please introduce yourself as well.
Vyacheslav Panin, private business IT. So as a business owner, I hear from my clients such a question. Now business brings me good money, but I don't have technologies. I'm not using the latest technologies. So they ask me why I should spend my money to new technologies. So my questions for you will be, what will be the ideal answer for the question?
Okay, yeah, piece of advice. Someone comes to you and you're trying to sell them some marvelous new idea and they're going, yeah, but why should I really? I can't afford it, I haven't got it. How would you help him to answer any client who says, lovely idea, but I can't afford it? Who would like to come in with some advice? Vincent?
Fine. Well, you can tell the story of a company called Kodak. No, maybe no. And what happened to them. No, I think Mark says it, in very simple terms. It's, there's two reasons. Business are looking to grow their revenue, or rationalize their cost and generate more margins to the shareholders. And technology can have an impact there to multiple effects. It is true, however, that the question you just asked is the same question some of our bigger clients also have for the moment. The business is afloat. We're just recovering from a crisis. Why should I not start embarking in yet another, risk-taking set of ventures? What we do recommend is at least they try, so they do that in a, at a smaller scale, so you get the learning out of it.
Yeah.
You build skills, and then you re-inject that into I would say the core of your business. So still doing that on the edge, whilst you're waiting, potentially for some that are slightly more visionary and that understand that if they do not do it now, because it's exponential, there's no way they're going to ever catch up.
There will
So
be a
it could
point at which
a
you
matter
have
of
missed the
survival.
train has left the station, and you're not
But
on
it's
it.
hard. It's a very hard case to make, for
Yeah.
a business that day in day out needs to continue pay bills, wages and
Okay, Mark, you wanted to come in.
Just a very quick one. I think it's very important to emphasize status quo is not risk-free. Because if you believe that the world is moving very fast, status quo actually has quite a lot of risks associated with it. So you're never going to get someone to buy until they actually understand the pain. So it's a pain and gain discussion. And one of the ways that you expose the pain is by exposing the risk of status quo.
Okay, yeah, so the cost of inaction. Rasmus.
Yeah, just again, the definition of our session is who are the losers, who
Yeah.
are the winners of that. So that's the answer. Who do
But-
you want to be?
So give them the inspirational stories of the people who've made the transition or are making it, and it is delivering for them. It's delivering new business models, but also the cautionary tales about how you end off a loser.
Yeah, I think just we are not saying just jump it from tomorrow. Put money, invest, everything. Yes, you have to evaluate risk, money you are putting,
Yeah.
everything. But look ahead, and if you will not, so you will be in that
Okay.
loser side.
Rasmus, can I just ask you on this question of entrepreneurship, because I know it's something you wanted to raise and discuss here. We're talking a lot about the challenges facing companies to make this adaptation, but do you see it as a real moment of opportunity from entrepreneurs for those bright startups? And if so, how do they make the biggest advantage of it?
Yeah, indeed. I see a huge possibilities in the future in terms of, let's thinking how Industry 4 will look like. So me as a customer will be putting the order, just in practical terms. Sitting at home, using PC, whatever, placing the order. So opportunity for small companies is to provide solutions for product design. So I'll be sitting at home designing what I wish to get from a company. So here's opportunity for designers, for programmers, for everything. Now that order will go to the factory in digital forms. Again, opportunity for small companies, for startups to make it work. I mean, to let companies get that order and start producing. That's not trivial thing. I mean, it's behind all that data transformation, data integration, whatever. There's a lot of opportunities for services.
Yeah.
Again, we are talking about big data today, data analytics. For small, medium-sized companies will be very difficult. I would say they will face challenges to get that knowledge inside. But maybe you don't have to. Maybe you can buy all that as a service. So it could be some small company, not small companies, but companies who will provide that as a service. So
And-
that's opportunity.
And no, but these platforms that bring everybody together, you as a big and established company, to what degree is that already happening? That you are going out there, you're finding the startups, the young entrepreneurs, the people with the bright ideas, and making a marriage between your networks, your expertise, and their bright ideas. Is that ecosystem working well enough now, or do we need to do more to oil it?
It's very important. I mean, to provide that information, provide a possibility to experiment around with these new technologies in a free and open space format, it's very, very important. That's why my company, SAP, is investing quite a lot, for instance, on various channels, be it in video channels, being on open class or open education, e-education sessions is very, very important. We also founded a kind of startup community about our in-memory platform HANA, where entrepreneurs and startups and really one or two guys can really sit together and experiment around what they can do with the big data platform we are providing. And with low, I would say with low touch also from our side, because we have put a lot of education and tutorials for free in the internet. So it's there to use, and they can use our cloud platforms to accelerate and to experiment around. And one point to the startups, in addition, I think every company, doesn't matter how big it is or large it is, should run as a startup. And we are trying to do that as well in our company to break this a little bit up, of course, these silos, and really working like you are responsible for the next innovation cycles, and you maybe have a team of 10 obviously of 10 people, but coming from different areas and expertise and experimenting, but have also clear business goals on their side. But I think also the times are a little bit over of these top-down or waterfall models.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. Thank you. So think like a startup, however established you are. We're almost out of time, but I want to ask you, and a similar question to the question I asked in the last panel, not only in terms of what do we need to do, but also in terms of advice to companies. I mean, we heard about the cost of doing nothing, and you'll miss the boat, you'll be among the losers. But if for each of you, and I asked Mark, we started with Mark in the first one, so I want to ask Rasmus, and I'll come down the line, you're just under a minute each. One piece of advice to companies who are thinking about this, hesitant, don't know where to start. How do you get started? And one piece of advice in terms of the policymakers, what they can do to help in all of this. What would your piece of advice to companies be, and your piece of advice to people like Dana? Rasmus first.
Yeah, advice for companies, be futuristic. See how your customers will behave in 10 years, 20 years ahead. For policymakers, I think what would help for companies to boost that investments in that area, I think some funding, dedicated funding for that. One thing for companies who will make solutions, I think standardization of how those machines, how systems interact, so kind of put standards behind for easy integration, that would help as well.
Thank you very much. So thank you. That's your piece of advice and your priority.
Well, yeah, I talked already about the DNA and the cultural change, so I'll mention something else, maybe to the question that was raised earlier about the opportunity as well, which is another way of formulating the advice. If you're thinking that 500 million customers an opportunity, think about the trillions of devices and objects and things that will be connected as yet another opportunity. The problem is in every given value chain, every sector, that means a completely different ways of working with different partners, which then ties to the advice to the policymaker, which I mentioned earlier, about really helping shape these new chains. For me, in Industry 4.0, if in 20 years from now we won't call it 4.0, we'll call it the new normal. What we know today as being the industry sectors, as we define them, as we measure them, as we observe them, will be named differently. We'll be talking about mobility as opposed to transportation. Every one of these industries will have a new definition of itself. And I trust policymakers to actually help shape that.
Thank you very much. Norbert?
I would say start now, or when you have not started, or when you have already started, accelerate that speed. Speed of innovation is changing exponentially. So start with easy cycle, pick something where you can find a sweet spot, because you can do a lot of projects, you can do a lot of things, but try to focus on certain areas where you maybe have the highest impact on your top and your bottom line in terms of interactive cycles of ideate, explore, and scale up the business. But also fail early and be brave to fail early, and kill your babies if necessary, your innovation babies or in technologies. Don't stick to it too long, maybe start another thing, and be a startup wherever you are, in which company. And from the governmental perspective, I said before, infrastructure. I mean, from the education side, everything about high-speed internet. I think there's still a lot of room. We can gather data privacy, security, think about everything is connected. It needs to be 100% secure. I mean,
Yep.
this is a very important topic as well.
Well, indeed, and cybersecurity is an issue that is going to be discussed in many sessions here. Dana, your priority for yourself and your piece of advice.
Right. I will start with a piece of advice for businesses. For us, of course, businesses are in the leading seat. So businesses will create the jobs of the future, will create the products and the service of the future. So what I would say is, what if you stop thinking, you stop doubting, and you go out there and you try to do it, and then be bold and ambitious and target high. And if there are stumbling blocks, you will find them, I'm sure. You know, come back to the policymakers and just be bold about what you're asking and how you're asking this to be resolved.
Okay, and
That's
for you?
from my experience, the important issue we expect. From me, would you expect to make recommendations for policymakers? I would
Of all the
say-
things you need to do, what's the most important thing you need to
Yeah,
do?
I believe I mentioned that before. I believe there is not one single thing that I would single out. There is a combination of different forces that we need to bring here, starting with political will, strong political will, investments, regulatory framework in place, and removing all
Okay.
barriers.
Thank you very much. Mark, you have the last word.
Okay, so business is fundamentally about demand and supply. And on the demand, you can't run a business unless you really understand what your customer is thinking and wanting. So sensing customer need and how it's evolving is critical. And on the supply side, it's all about the skills that you need in the business. And my key message is keep the costs variable. Avoid fixed costs. The digital world is all about variable costs. And that gives you my link into the policy recommendation. What we really need to do is expand and accelerate cloud computing, because what cloud fundamentally gives you is the capacity to increase your computing power at a variable cost without a fixed cost. And that is what will create the step change, I think, in many small, medium-sized businesses around Europe.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed for a really stimulating and fascinating discussion, and we managed in a short time to delve quite deep into the issues we're talking about. So thank you all very much.